For the past few years, I've been using the Pro Max over the Pro, and I've had no regrets. You get a bigger screen, better battery life, and sometimes even exclusive features, so what's not to love? But this year, things are different, and I've had a much more difficult time choosing between the Pro and the Pro Max after using them simultaneously every single day since launch. And in this video, I want to tell you why it's so hard to choose between these two and which one you should choose. So first off, the only reason I even contemplated going with the Pro over the Pro Max this year and breaking that cycle is because we have the exact same features on both phones. And that's different from last year because last year the Pro Max got the 5x telephoto lens, but this year both phones have that. So when you're not compromising on features and you're also not really compromising much on the price, because if you set these both to 256 gigabytes, it's only a $100 price difference, that makes the decision even more difficult, at least for me. And that's exactly why I wanted to spend more time with these phones so I could give you a better analysis of which one I think is best for me and also for you. So let's talk about the real world stuff here. So the displays are exactly the same this year. We have the same crispy 120 Hz OLED display. However, we saw our first screen size increase in 4 years this year with the Pro and the Pro Max. So the Pro is now 6.3 inches and the Pro Max is 6.9 inches. And as somebody who always thought that the 6.1 inch display on the Pro was just a tad too small, the 6.3 inch display this year on the Pro is perfect for me. And it's not just the screen size, we also have slimmer bezels on both the 16 Pro and Pro Max, but the 16 Pro Max has even slimmer bezels compared to the 16 Pro. And I actually notice it when I go, day to day using these. I use one for maybe like 3 days and then I use the other for like a week. I go back and forth using these and I can tell a difference in the bezel size. The Pro Max just has smaller bezels and it looks just better in general. And of course, yes, watching videos and watching any type of media on the Pro Max, that bigger display is always going to be better. That's not really, anything groundbreaking here. But the Pro, I never felt like I was missing out on much when I was watching videos on the 6.3 inch display. And the same goes with reading articles on Safari or browsing social media. Like, you can see more than enough content on the Pro compared to the Pro Max. Like, you do see more content on the Pro Max, obviously, but it's really not a huge difference, especially when you have your text size up to 110% like I do. And again, I just didn't feel like I was missing much when I switched back from the Pro Max to the Pro like I did last year. Now, things change a little bit when it comes to the design, because this is where I was able to tell the biggest difference between the Pro and the Pro Max. And that's because the Pro Max just feels super tall. Like, it's not wider or heavier than last year's Pro Max, it's just taller. And that has forced me to use reachability and certain action button configurations more than I ever have before to reach those areas of the screen, since I like to use my phone one-handed as much as possible. And it's also partially because I dropped my 16 Pro Max within the first week. It left a little mark, but nothing crazy. And that was from trying to do the ham gymnastics to reach the top of my phone. So now I just have my action button set to pull down the control center. And if you don't want to end up like me with a little defect on the side of your iPhone 16 Pro or Pro Max, you might need to get a good case from today's sponsor, TORRAS. So this is the TORRAS O-Stand 360-degree spin case. And it not only looks nice and sleek with these 3 lines that symbolize the hands of a clock, but it also has tactile button covers, a defined cutout for the camera control, a raised camera lip, and of course, the ring. And since TORRAS is the original designer of the O-shaped stand case, I already knew that this ring was going to be 10 out of 10. It's super useful not only as a phone grip when using your phone one-handed, especially with the Pro Max, but also because it spins a full 360 degrees and also has 4 notches where it locks into place. It also serves as a stand, so I don't have to look straight down at my phone when I'm watching a video while eating lunch, and it also has a magnet built in, so it'll stick to MagSafe chargers even better. And if you want even more protection, TORRAS also has the Glasgow X screen protector with a simple 2-step snap and pull install. I don't need to tell you the benefits of a screen protector, you already know that, but this install was amazing and I had no bubbles on my first one. So if you want to get solid protection for your iPhone 16 Pro or Pro Max, pick up the O-Stand with the Glasgow X screen protector at the link in the description below. Now, as for the weight, the 16 Pro is about 12% lighter than the 16 Pro Max. And it's not a huge difference when you're holding them like in your hands, just regular usage. You'll really start to notice the difference when it's in your pocket or when you're holding it up at night, just on your phone using one hand. Like the Pro just fits so much better in my pockets since I normally wear flimsy shorts and joggers. Like it just doesn't bounce around as much as the Pro Max does. And that's a big plus for me. And even if I'm wearing jeans or like tighter pants, the Pro is still better because it just doesn't bulge out as much as the Pro Max does. And the Pro Max in one of my pairs of pants doesn't even fit all the way down the pocket. Like yes, they are short pockets, but still only the Pro will fit all the way down, into that pocket, which is kind of funny. But of course, if you have a purse or if you wear a bag or a sling, it's not really going to matter which one you choose because you're not going to really have to feel that the whole time. And here's another area I noticed a minor difference, and that is when on the phone. So I don't necessarily feel fatigue with the Pro Max, but I don't feel the need to switch to speakerphone or throw in my AirPods for every call when I'm using the Pro. So the Pro is just more manageable in terms of weight and height, even when you're just on the phone for like a 15-20 minute phone call. If it's a short phone call, it's going to be no difference. But after time, the Pro, you can really start to feel the difference in just the weight and your tendencies, I guess, when you're on the phone. Now let's expand a little bit on one-handed usage because I know myself and a lot of you guys like to use your phone as much as possible with just one hand. And for the Pro Max, like I can reach across the entire display, but I'm squeezing the phone. And sometimes I accidentally press the camera control button when I do that. It just doesn't feel great. And I don't even have small hands. Like they're average sized hands, but the Pro Max is just huge. Again, it's not any wider than it was before. Like it's not a big difference in width. So it's not really like that. It's more in the height. Like when you're going up to pull down the control center or the notification center, you really have to readjust more than previous years. It's also a little bit difficult to type on the Pro Max with one hand unless you're using the one hand, keyboard down here. So that's another kind of nuisance. It's a minor inconvenience, especially if you're used to just using one hand, but that's really where you're going to have to figure out if you want to deal with those small inconveniences and if they're a deal breaker or not. Because in previous years, at least for me, they were not deal breakers. But this year, more than any previous year, I feel like it's harder to forgive those inconveniences when you don't have any additional features that make it worth it, if that makes sense. Aside from battery life, which we'll talk about that in a moment, that's another area where it didn't really go as expected. So yeah, before we talk about battery life, I do want to talk about the camera control button. The button itself is the same size on both phones, but the size and weight are going to matter the most here. They're going to make the biggest difference here, not the size of the button itself. And this is going to be hard to explain, but what it really comes down to is when you're using the camera control button, most of your weight is going to go down onto your pinky. So you would think that the less weight, the better, right? Well, actually, no, not really in my experience. I find that the Pro Max actually offers better stability when navigating the menus and even when snapping photos compared to the Pro. And that's because it's heavier and it's also less likely to move with your small movements of your fingers and when you press down, whereas the Pro tends to move a bit more when pressing on the button and the menus. However, I do still prefer using the camera control button on the Pro over the Pro Max for the simple fact that it can be used with one hand for longer periods of time, like when you're at a concert or a game, and you feel more in control of the phone, especially when you're holding it up high, like at a concert. Like the Pro Max, you're gonna really feel that fatigue, and it's also very top heavy at times. So, I just prefer using the camera control on the Pro over the Pro Max, but it has nothing to do with the placement itself on the phone. It's really just about the weight. But again, when it comes to the cameras themselves, it's exactly the same. We have no difference in cameras on the 16 Pro versus 16 Pro Max. We have that 5x telephoto, we have the amazing 4K 120 FPS, we have the photographic styles, all that is on the 16 Pro and the Pro Max. But one thing that isn't the same is the battery life. And this is an area where I was very surprised because I went into this thinking the 16 Pro Max is gonna have absolutely incredible battery life. It's gonna be the best battery life ever on an iPhone. And it is. Like, it's definitely the best battery life I've ever used. However, I was extremely impressed with the 16 Pro because using both these phones every single day, again, I have a SIM card in each of these, or not a SIM card, eSIM in each of these. So I'm using these in real world usage. Like I'm taking calls, texting, everything, and I've needed to charge these phones exactly one time per day maximum. So, yes, the 16 Pro would be a lower percentage at the end of the day than the 16 Pro Max, but guess what? At the end of the day, I only needed to charge each of these phones one time maximum. So to me, the benefit of the Pro Max is not nearly as significant as I was expecting. And that's because Apple really did something this year with the 16 Pro with the battery life. It's much better than previous Pros like the 14 Pro or the 15 Pro. And that improved battery life is key, especially when it's paired with the improved thermals, because I've been using these phones, even with gaming, and these don't get hot like at all. I don't really game very much. I just did it mostly for testing, but these phones don't get hot. So that also attributes to better battery life. And there's no difference between the Pro and the Pro Max, despite there being so much more room inside of the Pro Max. And the performance overall is the same as well. Like we have the same A18 Pro chip with 8 gigabytes of RAM on each, and all my daily tasks perform exactly the same. So with all that being said, should you get the iPhone 16 Pro or the iPhone 16 Pro Max? And as always, it depends. And let me tell you about that and then my final decision. So first off, if you want the biggest screen and the best battery life possible and you don't mind the weight, then obviously the iPhone 16 Pro Max is going to be the go-to for you. However, if you do mind the weight and you want to have a phone that you can use one-handed and not really miss out on any features like you had to in the past, the 16 Pro is excellent, and that is probably the choice for you. And here's something else I'll say, since I know a lot of people are not going to be upgrading from the iPhone 15 series, if you have an older model Pro Max, like a 12 Pro Max, 13 Pro Max, or 14 Pro Max, then I think that you should really consider the 16 Pro over the 16 Pro Max. And the reason I say that is because 6.3 inches, this display is 6.3 inches. Sure, it might not be as big as your 6.5 or whatever, iPhone you have screen, but the slimmer bezels and the lightweight feel of the Pro is going to be very compelling, I feel like, for a lot of older Pro Max users. I've talked to some people with older phones and they've gotten the 16 Pro Max and they're like, yeah, this is just too big for me. I don't need all of that. I like the Pro better. So obviously it's going to be personal preference here, but I'm just saying if you have an older device, don't just feel like you have to go from Pro Max to Pro Max. At least give the Pro a chance this year specifically. So just know that unless you have above average hands, or long fingers, you are going to be doing hand gymnastics throughout the day to just kind of navigate around your phone, especially when it comes to the top of your phone, like pulling down the notification center, pulling down the control center, reaching that icon up in the top left of your screen. That's going to be more difficult on the Pro Max this year because it is taller compared to previous iPhones. And for some, that's perfectly fine. That's a worthy trade-off for a bigger display and better battery life. Like that's how it was for me last year. I chose the Pro Max over the Pro and just dealt with the size and the hand gymnastics because of the better camera and battery life. But this year, I'm finding it less appealing to deal with the hand gymnastics and the size of the 16 Pro Max because there are no other benefits to be gained aside from the battery life. But even then, again, both devices only need to be charged up once a day maximum with my usage. So that's not nearly as big of a deal as I was anticipating. So for me this year, I'm actually going to be sticking with the iPhone 16 Pro over the 16 Pro Max, which is very surprising because this is the first time in years that I've downgraded in size from the Pro Max to the Pro. So I will be using the Pro Max from now on as my beta testing device, and I will be sticking with the 16 Pro as my main device. And unfortunately, I have to go and buy another 16 Pro now because I only got this in 128 gigabytes. I didn't even get it in 512 because I did not expect to be using this as my main device. So avoid my mistake. Don't go buying one of these just because of what you had in the past. You need to try them out and just take everything I said in this video as well into account in determining which one you should buy. And I will be revisiting this decision in about 6 months. So I will make a follow-up video in about 6 months, maybe 6 to 8 months in that time frame. And I will, let you know if I end up sticking with the 16 Pro after using it for multiple months over the Pro Max. But for right now, I have a full intention of sticking with the 16 Pro. And of course, I will be buying another one. I'm going to be keeping it in white and just getting it in 512. So that is my plan for now. And I just think that the 6.3 inch display is the perfect size for me. And I think a lot of previous Pro Max users will not feel the same, about the Pro Max this year like they did their current Pro Max. I just think that they'll like the 16 Pro this year. That's just my hunch. You let me know down in the comment below if you have an older Pro Max and if you decided to get the Pro this year instead of the Pro Max. But that's it, guys. Hope you enjoyed it. Subscribe for more, and I'll see you soon.